It's World Cup. And have you ever wondered how we might simulate the World Cup, or anything for that matter, whether it's a tennis match, whether it's a football match, or whether it's any other sport? Well, here we're going to try to do that and show you what it looks like. So the approach here is the Monte Carlo probability engine, or Monte Carlo simulation, and it is a relatively simple approach. So how might we do this? So to break down the problem, let's look at what we have in the World Cup. The World Cup has 48 teams this time round. Before we had 32. There are 12 groups of 4, and then there is a knockout stage. So what we would have to do is we would have to simulate all the possible combinations and all the possible events that could happen in the World Cup, and the scenarios. So to do this, what we have to do is we firstly have to understand what data do we put into this simulation. And to do this, I've chosen to pull out like the last 25 years of international matches, which will be used to calibrate the engine of itself. And then we can use the ELO system, and the ELO system is probably better known in like chess, but it also applies here for any other sport. And I've chosen to just pull one from the internet. It's not an ELO system I devised, but it is something that is used to track the relative strength between different teams. So the whole idea is, if you're an underdog and you beat a team that is rated much higher than you, the underdog team will get more points, and the higher rated team would lose more points. But if a high performing team beats the underdog team, then the points change will be very small. So the idea is it punishes you if you lose to the underdog, and if you beat a team you're supposed to beat, then you gain very little points. So the high level idea is you can't really farm teams. So if you're a strong team, you can't just, if you get like 100 wins against a team that you are ranked 100 places above, well, that is probably not consequential, and you won't inflate your rating. Well, the idea is it shouldn't inflate your rating. The other thing to keep in mind is, like, sometimes in some of these simulations they have a concept of home and away teams. You can see this in like sports betting, for example, where the home team will have a home court advantage. Now, of course, because this World Cup is being hosted in Canada, USA, and Mexico, the home team would just be those 3 teams. So rather than like the typical home and away scenario that you might have if you go online and look it up, we're only just going to focus on like those 3 countries having a home soil advantage for now. And the other thing with this simulation is, because if you look at the group stages, the group stage and how you determine who makes it through, for example, if you're ranked 3rd and you're tied in points, will be things around like goal difference. So rather than predicting just the result, whether they won or lost or drew, we're going to try to also simulate the actual result based on some of the expected goals. So then with this in mind, we have all of the constituent parts to be able to provide a simulation. And then the idea is we can then go and run this simulation just by drawing randomly to see what would happen for like over and over again for the whole World Cup. The thing is, we don't just draw it once. We use this kind of approach to just draw it like 10,000 times, and then you can come up with an idea about like, oh, how often does a particular scenario happen versus another scenario, and then you can try to use that or use that to infer like what probabilities there are. So once you have that, you can then go and see what's all the different variations that could happen. So like from the group stages, you could see what would happen if someone drew, someone won a match, or someone lost a match, and then use that to then propagate through to the final brackets, and then finally determine who is the ultimate champion. So the key thing is, like, we don't just need to use this. It doesn't necessarily like just always favor the favorites, of course. Like, you could, through the roll of the dice, or have a way to see how like an underdog might come through the ranks and win the whole tournament. And that's one of the really interesting things about Monte Carlo simulations, because it's not it doesn't just give you like a single number for like a single team to say, hey, it's just this team. You can go and see the breakdown of probability for all the teams. So just to sum up what happens in the Monte Carlo simulation, we start with predicting what actually happens in the match. And then once we know what happens in the match, we can actually lock it in and then re-simulate what happens based on what has just occurred. Now, what I mean by that is, yeah, we can simulate from the beginning of the tournament, but as the tournament goes on, we can also update this simulation to lock in those results and then simulate the future matches. So based on that, we can sort of get an idea for which teams perform better and which teams maybe have a higher chance. And of course, this just depends on your model and how your simulation goes. And we can start to see a picture of who may become victorious at the end. So with this in mind, I built something. And it's just completely run client side. It's just using Alpine.js, and it will be something that can run in the browser. So let's have a quick look now. So here we have a simulation of the World Cup. Of course, it's currently live and some of the results have been realized. And if we scroll down, we can see like a simulation of the knockout bracket. And of course, I also have the change in probabilities from the beginning of the tournament for what has happened. So for example, if we look at the qualifier and for some of the changes, you can see that, for example, certain teams may have a large bump, perhaps because they won their first match, and some teams may have a massive drop because they lost their first match. And these are realized here. So for example, I'm going to look at Australia. You can see that their qualification chances has increased dramatically after their win over Turkey. If we click on that group, for Australia group, we can see the qualification probability over time and how that has changed over the various match days. From the original match day to the game that was played, which was on the 12th of June. And we can also see the change in probability for their champion probability, which is of course very, very low, since all the teams still have a shot at the ultimate title. The other cool thing is, if we click on this, we can see the actual matches that was played and the results. And we can see the breakdown of the table and the expected standings, as well as how it flows through. So we can see that roughly as a proportion, which teams are most likely going to come first, second, third, and fourth. Cool thing about Monte Carlo simulation is it's very easy to simulate like something that would happen. So for example, if Australia was to beat USA 3-1, we can simulate that and then see what would happen. So we'll just let the simulation run again, and then we'll click through and see how all of those charts change. So now I can see this. You can see that this is the simulated result that I've entered here. And if we look at the table, we can see that this has now been updated to reflect that with the expected point totals. And now this outcome flow has also been updated accordingly. So this hopefully gives you a taste for the power of Monte Carlo simulation. Like, through very simple models, we can go and simulate the result of tournaments that have a complex structure. We can update part of the tournament and then re-simulate to see what would happen. So to do some kind of what if analysis and just play around and see how things change over time. So that's my take on the World Cup. Hopefully you learned something, and I'll catch you next time.